acariciarte y ponerte a dormir. Es escalofriante tenerte de frente, hacerte sonreír. Daría cualquier cosa por tan primorosa, por estar siempre aquí. Y entre todas esas cosas, déjame quererte, entrégate a mí. No te fallaré, contigo yo quiero envejecer. Quiero darte un beso, perder contigo un tiempo, guardar tus secretos, cuidar tus momentos, abrazarte, esperarte, tenerte paciencia, tu locura es mi ciencia. Cada movimiento, un vicio que tengo, un gusto valorarte, nunca olvidarte, entregarte mis tiempos. No te fallaré, contigo yo quiero envejecer.
I appreciate you all taking time out of your schedule to be here with us. I just wanted to welcome you on behalf of the board. Thank you for your time. And, I think we have a good program for you. I think it's going to be very interesting and enlightening, and you're going to have an opportunity to hear some testimonies. Man, do you love a good story? Come on, it ends well. We need more stories that end well in the cancer world. So what we wanted to do is just have a couple patients talk and give a testimony, then the doctor will give his presentation, and then we'll wrap this up. So, but thank you again. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Mike and Deborah Henry. Mike is also a board member, and Deborah is under Dr. Nezami's care, and they're just going to share their story with you. So welcome them. Let's give them a big round of applause.
Good afternoon. Yes, I believe I'm blessed with the mic today, so I'll be speaking on behalf of our family. Again, thank you. We're honored to be here. I'm Michael Henry, and my wonderful wife, Debbie, that's been under Dr. Nezami's care. Well, how it all began. We were heading to Arkansas. We had tickets scheduled for April 1st and of 2020. Thank you, honey. And then suddenly, end of March, a lump came in. March 7th. In fact, won't you speak the beginning?
Yes, I woke up in the morning and I was stretching. I felt some pain in my breast. And I looked down there and I felt that there was a lump. And I asked my husband if it was there the night before, and he said no. So it just kind of came up overnight. It kind of came up overnight. And it was very painful, like an acidy painful feeling. So we went to the doctor and was hoping that it wasn't cancer. But it ended up being cancer. Anyway, I did the running around, trying to get everything going and getting the lump out before we went on our trip. Well, with COVID going on, the trip kind of kept getting delayed because we were supposed to leave April 1st, and we ended up leaving April 2nd. I ended up getting the lump out April 1st, and then we flew in Arkansas. Well, New Orleans in Arkansas.
Yeah, so that was a little surprise journey. When it first came up, my thought was, what comes up that fast? Maybe a swollen gland. It had to be. So we had no concern at all when we left on our trip. I mean, she just had the biopsy. We're on the plane, and there was only 7 people on the 737 plane. It was amazing. I loved it flying during COVID. But so we get there and we get back from our trip, and we find out, and we come out of the office, it's cancer. And I'm like, so we've been seeing a nurse practitioner for the previous 4 years, and the first thing came out was like, you know what? Let's call Lita Senor, and we gave her a call. Because at this point, we already knew that we didn't want to go the traditional route, because my mother has had stage 4 cancer 3 times. And the last time in 2015 it occurred, my sister and my mom were going through breast cancer at the same time with mastectomies, and Debbie and I were caring for my mother. And so we knew we didn't want that route. There had to be another way. And so through our nurse practitioner, we found out about Dr. Nezami. First thing, she gave us some options. Dr. Nezami, a few options. And I said, all right, I looked at his video. And I'm saying, it didn't take long for me to be convinced. As soon as I watched the video, I said, that makes sense to me. And so I scheduled an appointment. We were within the doctor's office within a week. And we wanted to find out about the therapy. He explained it all. You'll hear about it later. And I point blanked him. I point blank Dr. Nezami. Now, I know that he's confident. This is a confidence level. And I don't know how accurate this number is, but that says out of all the clients you've seen that had stage 4 cancer with breast cancer, what's your percentage rate? No, just your 90%. Now, I know he's confident. Now, it could be 80, it could be 85, it could be 7, but it's better than the number when we went to the oncologist that said when we do all the treatment, we still may have a 40% chance of survival. And so we chose Dr. Nezami. And that's not it. This is how it went after that. So we started the treatment immediately. 10 days of treatment with the IV and targeted treatment for Debbie's cancer. We sent out the work to the labs of our current state. And then 10 days later, we're waiting for the results. And that's when we went to the oncologists and got their expertise and their opinions. By the time we got the results back, it was after my oncologist said that we didn't have much time to go. The cancer was clear. That's a miracle. And what the thing is that we were blessed to come here first to Dr. Nezami. And Dr. Nezami's involved, God's involved. I don't know, I'm just accepting it. And I received the blessing and the gift and everything that's going on right now. And we just want to thank you, Dr. Nezami, for what you're doing to society and letting us participate with you.
Thank you so much for sharing. I have to take the mic after that story. That is awesome. Wow, thank you. Our next patient is Anita Gardner.
Well, my name's Anita Gardner, and I found Dr. Nezami also through Lita Senior, a nurse practitioner, who's been my friend for a long time. And when I found that I had something going on in my lung, she said, oh, you got to see him. And that's before I even knew I had cancer. She said, you better just check him out. And I had a chest x-ray because I felt fine. And they showed that I had just a small nodule in my lung. And then I got a CT scan. And the CT scan showed that it could be pneumonia. So I got treated for pneumonia for 3 or 4 months. And then they did a bronchoscopy and they found out that I had left upper lobe lung adenocarcinoma. So then you follow it's like, if you have cancer, it's like a whirlwind of information that you're looking for. You don't know, everything's unknown. And there's so many options. And because I know a lot of medical people, they give you the traditional route, and I know a lot of alternative people, so it's like both ends of the spectrum. So I had a left upper lobectomy at Cedars-Sinai, and then I didn't know what to do after that. My oncologist recommended the standard protocol. You get chemo, because if you have what I have, everybody gets chemo, a certain type, and then you get this pill that is specific for my type of tumor. Well, I just didn't feel comfortable with that. So then, because I knew about him, I set up a virtual consultation, and as soon as my husband and I, that's my husband over somewhere over there. It just fit. You know, I just felt right about it because everything else seemed like it was so unknown and so scary and so dangerous. And you're going to feel terrible, and all these terrible things are the way you're going to be. So when Dr. Nezami talked about it, it was kind of like a mixture of integrative medicine and medicine. And I liked that because I've always kind of practiced like that. And so it's kind of seemed the best of both worlds. I first went there, I had my lobectomy the end of June, and then I came to see him in August. My baseline labs were elevated, and so I did 10 treatments, and they came down. And then he told me, well, if you do 20 more treatments, I think you should be, or 15, whatever it was, you should be normal. And so the test, I did that many treatments, and my labs came back down, so they were normal then. One of them was elevated, and it went up a little bit, so he adjusted my treatment and said, now I need to focus on that. And then after certain treatments, it went down. So they both came down, so now they're all good. I really appreciate Dr. Nezami because he has a different approach. It's not just following the oncology algorithm. You have this is what you get. It doesn't matter. You know, you're not a patient, you're a diagnosis. He treats the individual and what's happening with you. And so I really appreciate him, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Nita. And Nita's a nurse, so she knows more than the average bear, too. Great job. I've known the doctor for about 9 years. He's a graduate of USC and UCSF, the president of Orange Coast Medical Center of Hope, Sahel Oncology, which is a novel drug company. I consider him an innovator, inventor, and leader when it comes to developing the most effective and least toxic oncology treatments. And for me, in my interactions with him, he's really been it's my personal opinion, kind of a Sherlock Holmes of helping people in oncology situations. So we're going to have the doctor now share about oncology and epigenetics and its role. Thank you, Dr. Rory.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to see you all. All these things that you heard about me is true, but it's only a part of the story. And the rest of the story is actually you, the patients. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because all these people that they are considered successful stories, they come here and they share their stories with you, with the public. They sometimes think that all that they have done and accomplished is because of Dr. Nezami. But Dr. Nezami knows that part of the story has to do with the patients themselves, and it's a teamwork. As much as natural tendency of a human being is to be proud of the accomplishments he has done in life, I think my most accomplishment in life so far has been to be able to reflect what patient sends, the message, the energy. I'm just trying to be a good mirror. So, The patients don't like to see an oncologist when they reflect something completely opposite of what the patients send. As a human being, they are treated as numbers, as subjects, as cases. You know, I have a lot of cases, but these are human beings and I treat them as such. When the other side of the fence looks at people, looks at human beings as experimental subjects, and as such they don't understand the meaning of compassion. And I think that is my pride, that I acknowledge that. So, congratulations to all of you as patients of mine, as supporters and advocates of our foundation, because what you are doing and will be doing impacts millions of people by sending the information and public awareness through the foundation. Everybody who is exposed and treated, they can take advantage of this opportunity. And so saving lives is basically the mission of our foundation. And you know, writing the mission for the foundation for me took a long time because I had to describe different missions for our foundation, but the bottom line is that I'm here to save lives. So, if that's a good common mission for everyone, and you like to be part of it, I encourage you to sign up with Brian to be an advocate for the foundation, because I think foundation needs more human resources and minds of people than money. As I have always said, money is good. People can make money and enjoy spending it. But there are things that money cannot buy. And there are things that are much more important in life. And so I think more than donation, we expect the involvement from the individuals who want to be involved with the foundation and be advocates for it. So Brian, I am proud and blessed to be working with him and his family. He has his own story that he will share. And I think the future is bright for our foundation because we have, again, human resources people that they will commit, and they are committed by their lives, by their heart to support what we're doing, and again, for the cause that I just explained, saving lives. So before getting into the topic of today, which is preventive oncology, it's a very heavy discussion. And the reason that it may be a little bit sophisticated as far as the terminologies as I go through it is because it's going to be recorded, and we're trying to also educate physicians in this field. Hopefully, and I say that with a sigh because hopefully they will understand and appreciate how you can actually prevent cancer before it happens, and how you can reverse it when it happens. You know, the cases that you just saw, they came and talked, and there are many others that have been able to save their lives. Why did it happen? How did it happen? Why is it that cancer is so difficult to treat? And as you probably have heard that from me so many times, that when your car is broken and you take it to the wrong mechanic, it becomes worse. And then now somebody has to fix it. Not only the first problem, but the problems that the wrong mechanic caused. And that's the story with the oncologists out there, is that they don't understand the biology of cancer. Many years that I have worked with the PhDs in the lab, I appreciated the fact that the oncology at the clinical level is so behind when it comes to the research, when it comes to the biology of the cancer, and appreciating that. So that is pretty much reflected in some of these slides as we go through. So don't create a headache for yourself by trying to analyze all the information. Just get, and one of the arts that I think I have been able to use is that I come up with simple solutions for very complicated problems. And how do I do that? I try to meditate and relax. When the oncologists are running between the patients to see 100 patients a day, they don't even remember the patients' names. I try to relax and think. Sometimes patients come and see me and they ask me questions when I don't know the answer. And in fact, many questions they ask, I don't know the answer. That day I had a patient who had lung cancer came to see me and he said, you know, Dr. Nezami, you've seen my chart and I've been diagnosed with lung cancer. I went to my oncologist and he said, we're going to give you chemotherapy and you're just going to be fine. And then I went to a surgeon and he said, we're just going to remove your lungs and you're going to be fine. And now I'm coming to see you, what do you think? And I said, I don't know. And then he said, do you think your treatment can help me? I said, I don't know. Any question he asked that day, I said, I don't know. And then he said, oh my God, I love it. He said, this is the first time that a doctor says, I don't know. That means you're thinking. That means you're not following just the protocol without even knowing who I am, what kind of genetics my tumor has, what sort of options I have. And that was exactly what we did. We got the genomics of the tumor, we strategized the treatment plan based on the findings that are customized to that patient. And sure enough, that patient with lung cancer is cancer-free as we speak. And we have many of these patients that start with questions that I don't know the answer, and they end up with being cancer-free. So how does that happen? It happens with somebody who is open-minded. That's something that most of the doctors are not. So the topic of the lecture today is mostly focused on how cancer is created and how we can prevent that from happening. So I use common sense a lot in everything I do in medicine. So one of these days I was laying at the beach and looking at the water. And then I just thought, I said, when we have cancer, it starts anywhere in any tissue, how does it look? So I went back to my memory when I was looking under the microscope, how this, and I'm laying at the beach, I'm not looking in a lab looking under the microscope. But I'm just thinking, how does cancer start? And then I started to think on what I saw under the microscope 25 years ago. And I remember that these cancer cells, when they started the colonies, they looked like a clot, very similar to pregnancy. They start looking just like a clot. And then I thought, maybe cancer is a blood clot. That's a very dumb idea, right? But I'm just trying to give you a concept of looking at sophisticated problems, but thinking simple, and trying to understand problems by finding simple solutions. So next thing I do is I look at the Google and I find a study in 1974 that they started to treat patients with cancer using fibrinolytics, the medications that we use to dissolve blood clots. Oh, why? So I'm not the first one who was thinking about this. So back when I was 4 years old, somebody was thinking the same way and they started to use fibrinolytics and this blood clot. So I started to now look at the molecular pathways to find out how this happens. So sure enough, that started a chapter of my book. I have 3 books that I'm working on. 2 of them is already published. One is the textbook of integrative oncology in 2014. I co-authored that with Dr. Wells. The second one was published in August, Transition from Crime to Care in Oncology. I hope you have a copy. If you don't, please buy one or get one from our clinic and read that. And then the third book is on the press, hopefully by the end of this month. That will be a summary of all the cases that I have treated. It's a pretty big book, it's about 1,000 pages. So I'm looking, and so I started to write about it, that how can we use common sense in oncology? And then I started to write all these concepts that came to my mind with common sense thinking. Like one of them was, which parts of the world cancer doesn't exist? Simple question, right? Is there any part in the world that we have less cancer? And then finding out what do they do that they don't get cancer, right? We're talking about preventive oncology. So then I researched and found out that there are areas in Mexico that people, there's no data that says they don't have cancer because they don't want anybody to know. But again, using common sense, if people live more than 100 years, probably they don't die of cancer when they're 40, right? Because they live more than 100 years. So just looking at areas in the world that people live very long, that means that they don't get cancer, right? I don't care if they get cancer at 110. But that started to another subject of my studies to find out what do they do, what do they eat. And then we found a compound that they eat and very delicate food, which we don't have in the US. And then we manufacture that product. You see the whole concept, the whole journey, the whole, even drug companies, came from a very simple question and a very simple looking at a problem. So when you talk about molecular epigenetics, for example, it can get as sophisticated as it blows my mind. And that means blowing like 50 oncologists' minds. But if you think about all these conferences that I have attended since 2010 and 11 when the epigenetic concept came, all these conferences and all these topics and all these molecular pathways were described by PhDs, not the MDs. I was the very first MD that I attended these conferences. And I swear to God, I was sitting there looking at these PhDs talking about epigenome, and I had no idea what the hell they were talking about. It was so complicated. But then, in the same conference that I couldn't understand, the first one was in Barcelona in 2012, that I couldn't understand anything they were saying, well, a few years later, I started to teach in the same conferences to the same PhDs. So what happened? Well, I cared, that's all. I cared and I connected the dots. And so I'm listening, and then I'm thinking. Whatever I do, if I'm driving, if I'm sitting at home, if I'm traveling, if I'm playing, I just try to think and filter out any other distractions that can block that. So all the images of the patients are always in my mind, all the patients. And constantly I think about them and I think how I can do a better service, okay? So, let's focus for the sake of time on the topic. It's going to be a lot of information, as I said. Don't get a headache. Just take an aspirin or something. I don't know. Okay. So I'm going to read some of these slides because I don't want to talk about something and then you look at the slide and it says something else. So if you don't mind, I'll read it and then I'll explain it. And feel free to ask me and interrupt me with any questions during the lecture because I like that interaction. So the state of the health in our country is very obviously inferior, meaning that compared to any other country in the world, we invest the most in oncology and in medicine in general. But unfortunately, that investment and research goes to the things that don't matter. For example, prevention is only 5% of the NIH budget. Screening tools that we use are very retarded. You know, pretty much it's retroactive, so you do mammographies. Why? Because you want to see when you get cancer. That's ridiculous. You have to do that every year to see when it pops up. Well, now we know that by just doing epigenetic testings, you can identify who's at risk. You can find out what epigenetic marks are at range, and you can treat it. For example, for the BRCA gene, if somebody has positive BRCA, what do? They remove their breast and ovaries. Ridiculous. So BRCA gene mutation is involved with any other organ cancer, including pancreatic cancer, stomach cancer, brain cancer. You can't remove all these organs. And then finally, as you know, the incidence of cancer is going up, especially in the last decade and especially in the last year. and especially in the group of individuals 20 to 45 age. So when you look at the data, you see the carcinogen, the epidemics of cancer or incidences of cancer in the ages of 45 and less is going up, up, up. And it's a global problem, it's not just in the US. I was in Dubai a year ago, and the incidence of colorectal cancer, specifically in that country, was seen 20 to 45 years old, 8 times more than US. So you can see how it's impacting the entire globe. So what do we, as drug doctors, when you have a patient and the patient comes and says, doctor, what can I do not to get cancer? Oh, healthy diet and exercise. Now we know that healthy diet is not healthy for everybody, so recommendations for greens and vegetables and all that we used to recommend for patients. Now we know, based on the largest nutritional study named Oxford study, now we know that green vegetables can increase the chance of cancer in certain individuals. And the whole concept of nutrigenomics is looking at the gene of the person. In one of my patents, I explained this very fully on how the catechol O-methyltransferase enzyme and gene can dictate what sort of diet you need to be on, because obviously if you're on leafy vegetables, they are enriched with folic acid and metal donors. And so if you have a specific COMT gene, then you should avoid leafy vegetables. The same is true for multivitamins and minerals. So as primary care doctors, everybody says take multivitamin minerals. You go to the store, even prenatal vitamins that we prescribe to pregnant mothers. Now we know that these metal donors, they can increase the chance of cancer in patients who have a specific DHFR, dehydrofolate reductase enzyme activity. And it's been published. So some of these are my claims, and some of them are already prior art, they call in patent law, and it's been already published. So you know that when certain DHFR status is there, taking minerals, taking folic acid and B12 can increase the chance of cancer. And one of the theories behind increased incidence of breast cancer in our generation is because our mothers started to take prenatal vitamins when they were pregnant. Okay, so there's no vaccine, obviously, for cancer. So if we believe that fixing a problem requires fixing the cause of the problem, then that means that you have to define when the cancer started and how it started, and then you go after that. So you're at the age of 40 or 50 and you get diagnosed with cancer, right? But we know that cancer is detectable in that individual when she's born. So if somebody's destiny is to get cancer when they are born, why do we wait until the age of 50 and then detect the cancer in a screening imaging? It's ridiculous, pap smear. You have to wait 20, 40, 50 years before somebody is diagnosed with cancer and they tell them, oh, I got bad news, you have cancer. No, this person was born with the genetic alteration that 99% predispose that person to get cancer, and you can do that by a simple saliva, urine, or blood test that identifies who's going to get cancer. And again, I described that in many of my patents on how you can find out who's at risk and prevent that many, many years before that happens through epigenetic modifications. And so if that's the case, then we have to start preventing from the time that a person is born. So again, one of my recommendations to the health authorities was to test kids at the school, find out what is their nutrigenomic status, what diet they need to be on if they have a strong family history of cancer, so that they don't get cancer. So you see, prevention comes when the problem starts. So one of the, again, concepts of preconceptional medicine is exactly that, of when a woman gets pregnant, and even before that, how can you prevent cancer from the offspring? So there are ways that you can do that. All right. So everyone needs to be tested, because if we believe that cancer is an epidemic and everybody is going to get cancer, then we have to test everybody, versus right now, even with all the advances that have been made in the recommendations, they still hesitate to test patients, certainly not individuals, unless they have very, very strong family history. The insurance company hesitate to pay. The testing, the labs that they have been doing all these amazing testings, unfortunately have been either shut down by the FDA or sold. For example, in 2008, I started from myself. I tested myself because I had a strong family history of cancer. And so the laboratory was called Epigenetics. You can Google it. In 2009, it was sold for $6.5 billion to Life Technologies and further acquired by Thermo Fisher. And now if you go to Thermo Fisher website and want to order that test, there's no test. Completely buried. So I have my test, I look at it from 2008, and it tells me my risk of colorectal cancer is 6 times more than a normal individual, and my prostate cancer risk is more than 9 times of a normal individual. What do? It explains what genes are altered, and I treat that with epigenetics. That's why you come to my clinic and you see I have an IV, and I'm going from one room to the other, right? So that's the whole concept. If you have the lab, if you have the technology, and you can find out what genes are altered, you can modify it. So again, it's not an interest of the government, and I don't know why they pay $6.5 billion just to get rid of a test. Okay. So, all right. We talked about this a little bit. Okay, so there are a lot of arguments about genetics versus epigenetics and all that. And I don't want to give you a headache. All I can tell you is this. The concept of genetic mutations causing cancer is, again, part of the story. It's a very insufficient definition of cancer. And the reason I'm saying is, for example, the placenta is an organ when a child is born has the highest mutation rate. You cannot find any organ, even in a cancer patient, that has higher mutations in the cells than placenta. Yet there has been never reported a case of placental tumor or placental cancer. So that just completely disputes the idea that genetics cause cancer. But here's the dilemma. The dilemma is that the role of epigenetics are not defined. So yes, you need to have the bad gene, but you also have to have a bad environment. You also have to have an element that expresses those genes. And that expression of the gene is the epigenome. So we talked about these a little bit. Okay. So there are many scientists who have worked on the area of epigenetics. The epigenetic dream team, I had been involved with them in 2012 in Boston at Koch Institute in MIT. And Stephen Bailey from Johns Hopkins and Peter Jost from USC were at the time studying compounds that I use in my clinic, but they were using it in rats. So we had a very good conversation because they were explaining to me what happened in the rats, and I already knew what happens in human because I was using it in my clinic. But anyways, so, but some of these core scientific progress has been done by conventional doctors, as I said, PhDs mostly in the labs. And some of them, like Dr. Bruzeski, as I had mentioned here, was studying rats and looking at how much the urine content byproducts of butyric acid differs between a rat that has cancer and a rat that doesn't cancer. And he found that the rats who have cancer have less byproducts of butyric acid. So he came up with the idea that if butyric acid has any anti-cancer effect or preventive effect. And he was right. So I go to this because histone deacetylase inhibitors, antineoplastones that he uses is one of them. They have very different, perspectives of how they work, why they work, and scientifically, there's a lot of discussions about them. But the epigenetic protocols that are a combination of demethylators of the DNA and histone deacetylase inhibitors, these two compounds, different category of compounds, have been again studied very well by John Hopkins scientists that some I have worked with. Excuse me. And the combination of those was patented again by Stephen Bailey, and then we advanced it into using it in a natural format and how you can maximize the effect. Now, there are, if I want to make this simple for you, I usually have ties, but today I don't. But if you imagine that the DNA is like a tie, and there are lines on the DNA, some dark, some white, and these white ones are the oncosuppressor genes, and the black ones are oncopromoter genes. Demethylating the DNA makes these genes express. So you take a you take a methyl group out of the C5 CPG island, and then you unleash that gene if it's an oncopromoter or it's an oncosuppressor. The problem with the epigenetic drugs that are in the market or have been used since 1940 is that they demethylate the entire DNA. So the expression effect on the DNA is global, what we call, meaning that all the oncosuppressor genes and oncopromoter genes all unleash themselves. And that's not what we want. That's why you see all the studies that they have done on epigenetic drugs have failed in solid tumors, because not only they unleashed, meaning that the expression went up on oncosuppressor genes, which is desirable, but also on oncopromoter genes, which is not desirable. And so I can talk a lot about this, but selective natural compounds, as the name pertains, they are selective. So they don't go unleash the bad guys. They only go unleash the oncosuppressor genes. And therefore, you take advantage of this selective effect on these genes. So definitely, as far as mechanism of action, they are superior to conventional drugs. Plus that conventional epigenetic demethylators, they also cause cancer. There are genes that become active. Okay, so the story of the stem cells, again, if we believe that cancer is caused by stem cells, and these stem cells have epigenetic aberrancies since we are born, then we have to switch these stem cells back to normal activation so that that person will not get cancer. How do we do that? We use combination of demethylators and histone deacetylase inhibitors in a selective format that they go and unleash the oncosuppressor genes. And one of the most important ones called C-mice. C-mice, this gene, again, I did not discover this. This was a gene, it's a theory of bivalency that one of our colleagues, Dr. Bailey at John Hopkins, basically discovered that. So C-mice is a gene that if it's altered, if it's overexpressed, then the stem cell becomes cancerous. If it's shut down, then the cancerous stem cell becomes normal. So that's why he called it bivalency, because it's a dynamic process, meaning that today a cancer patient can have more cancer stem cells, and tomorrow may have less cancer stem cells and more normal stem cells. These stem cells are dynamically able to convert to cancerous phase, and so that's why they're confused. So that's where we take advantage of that by using these epigenetic drugs. And we switch them back into the normal behavior where we reduce their plasticity. I told you it's going to be a little bit headache. Don't take your aspirin. Yeah, so clinically, we have 0 recurrence in our patients. So when it comes to the idea of prevention, we have obviously 3 kinds of prevention: primary prevention, secondary prevention, tertiary prevention. Primary prevention is for somebody who doesn't have cancer and you don't want to get cancer. So that's primary prevention. Secondary prevention is for somebody who had cancer and doesn't want the cancer come back. A secondary prevention. So we have patients like many of you who had cancer and now they're cancer-free and you don't want the cancer to come back. In this group of patients that I have been able to accomplish a full remission, the recurrence rate, I think, is 0. I don't remember a patient that I have cured and their cancer came back. Why? Because we go after what caused the cancer to start from beginning. And that's exactly what is missed in oncology offices, is that they treat the tumor and they say, we treated cancer. Cancer and tumor are totally different things. I haven't even talked about tumor today because I care less about the tumor. So they get rid of tumor somehow, and I think you don't need even to be a doctor to get rid of a tumor. But then they say, well, you're cancer-free. Well, no, tumor comes back very quickly. And so the reason that we have 0 recurrence in our patients is that we monitor these people and then we go after what caused the tumor from beginning, these epigenetic switches in the stem cells. All right. Then the whole concept of cancer, I explained this here a little bit more in detail of going back on the blood clot idea. So you have soil and you have the seed. The seed are the genomics, and as I said, you got the placenta with thousands of mutations in their cell. So it's filled with these seeds. But there's no soil because there's no microenvironment that makes those genes express themselves. So you have to have the seed and soil. Seed and soil. So what we do is that we go after both of them. We suppress the mutations in the seed by epigenetic therapies. I explained that as an example, C mice. And then we go to the soil, which is the microenvironment, and we do that by looking at the growth factors. And again, these growth factors are best biomarkers that you can measure them in the blood sample. It tells you where the soil is ready for that person to get cancer. I'll give you an example, myself. So I check these soil quite often by doing biomarker testing on myself because the numbers change. Today you can have a great soil that the cancer cannot grow. A year from now you can have a terrible soil because of what you have done, and now the seeds can grow. Okay? People think, was he a farmer before? And so what do? You check these biomarkers that correlate with the soil, permeability, availability. If you think about pregnancy, again, blood clot pregnancy, right? How does a woman becomes pregnant? It has to be a right egg and sperm, and it has to be a right uterus, the soil. And many of these miscarriages is because there is no right uterus, there is no right soil. So what do? We force the body to do exactly what the uterus does when it rejects a pregnancy, right? A while back, I just remembered that I had this guy, he was like 40 years old, had melanoma, and I prescribed an abortion pill for the guy. And he didn't even look at the prescription. He took it, he went to the pharmacy, and the pharmacist said, it's for your wife, she's pregnant. He said, I don't have a wife. It's for me. And the pharmacist said, this is an abortion pill, RU486. You order it online, 2 days, you drop the baby. And he comes back and he said, doctor, you gave me an abortion pill. Right? So that's exactly what it happens with abortion pill. Rejects the pregnancy, and I can talk about this in many more molecular detail, but I don't want to give you a headache. Many of the natural compounds, they do exactly that. In fact, if you read my book, I have a chapter over there that I talk about teratogens, the medications that can cause fetal abnormalities. I use them for cancer because these teratogens are starting from aspirin. And I tell all the cancer patients to take aspirin, by the way. Blood clot, right? Aspirin prevents the blood clot. It causes fetal abnormalities. It destroys the seed, the soil for the seed. That's exactly how it works and many other natural compounds. And you can track this. So in my case, I did my test by biomarkers, elevated. Oh, it's elevated, I'm gonna get cancer. So I started my own treatment. 5 treatments IV, came down to normal. And I monitored, otherwise I wouldn't be here. So these are, I try to go fast because like 5 minutes left. These are some case studies that, okay, so 40-year-old female with ER/PR positive, large multifocal left invasive ductal carcinoma, treated in 2010 by epigenetic therapies at my clinic. So back then I had a clinic in Fresno, so she came to me and she said, I don't want to do chemo. I don't want to do radiation, just like Debbie that came here. And by the way, she had triple negative breast cancer. And you know, triple negative breast cancer is the death sentence. And she said, I don't want to do chemo, same way that Debbie said. And I said, okay, so we'll start you on our therapy. 2022, as we speak, there's no sign of breast cancer. That's 12 years past. And the standard of care probably have offered her 6 months to live maximum, right? So this is a simple case example. Now again, she was BRCA positive, and I explained a little bit about the BRCA if I have time. So I have some of patients here that they have ATM alteration. I think you're one. Yeah. So what is ATM? And the whole BRCA complex that has P10, and I swear to God, none of this information was taught to me when I was in the school. My specialty is not genetics. But I have to train other doctors about this stuff. So I'm just wondering, like, how does this happen that I know this stuff? And okay, so ATM is an upstream gene in that complex of ATM, BRCA, RAD, and P10. And when ATM becomes mutated, it cannot phosphorylate the BRCA, so BRCA cannot attach to RAD, so the P21 cannot be activated, which is an oncosuppressor gene, so it cannot block the G2 in the phase of the mitosis, okay? So just by doing 3 compounds that I have mentioned here, selenium, vitamin D3, and quercetin, you can activate P10. P10 substitutes the BRCA when it's mutated, and you save your breast and ovaries. You don't have to remove them. So bad news for Angelina Jolie because she just didn't have to do that. You see, by taking three supplements, natural supplements, you can activate the P10. So that's that. 49-year-old female, triple negative breast cancer, incomplete with positive margins after surgery, high Ki-67, same thing. We tracked them by markers, came down. She's in complete remission. 53-year-old breast cancer, very, very active. Ki-67, as you can see, was 80%. And her PET scan showed metastatic disease with active alterations everywhere. Lymph nodes were involved. And then again, after I think 2 to 3 weeks of treatment, completely gone with circulating DNA clearing up. And, right. So this is actually your case, Vivian.
Oh, that's mine?
Yeah. Right, so.
I love the map.
You know, at least I don't show you, because I've seen this, like doctors present the cases, and then that person is dead. And they're showing the case how success. So she's sitting here.
Yeah, I'm alive.
Right? And as you can see, she's been my patient since April of 2016. And no chemotherapy, no radiation. And then she's been doing great this year in December last year, and in August we checked, it went up, and the cancer was coming back. You see, just by doing a test by Guardant Laboratory, and I think their representative was here today by Guardant Lab. But I was one of the first people that I started working with Guardant when they started back in, I think, 2013. And I remember nobody even cared at the time. It was not FDA approved. Everybody said, oh, we don't even know what that is. And then the issue of reimbursement and all that. Now, thankfully, some academic institutions ordered this test, and yet they cannot understand it. I published a very good study with Rick Landman, who's the chief scientific officer of Guardant Laboratory. We presented it at AACR and NIH. So as you can see, it dropped from 17% to 0.2, which is pretty much completely gone because 0.2 is considered noise. So this patient is in complete remission after the treatment. This is the perfect example of secondary prevention because she was treated in 2016, became cancer-free, and in 2022, after 6 years, her cancer came back, and we stopped it just by doing the epigenetic therapy.
The 0.2 is not even ATM, it's a different one.
Yeah, so it's good. All right, that's it. So do you guys have any questions?
Can you expand on the, I was really interested how you're saying certain foods can be bad. So like for us, we, very green leafies and all that stuff. So what's gonna...
Yeah, so the DNA has, in different people, has different expression of genes. When somebody gets the cancer, the locations of the DNA that is oncosuppressor genes, the good genes, the genes that are supposed to prevent cancer, are located on the CPG islands, what we call cytine-guanidine island. Those loci, based on exposure to methyl donors, if you have folic acid, which is a methyl donor, and it's in the leafy vegetables, they become suppressed because methylation, they are methyl donors. So they give a methyl group, they donate a methyl group, so the methyl group attaches to that 5-methylcytosine in that region, and the gene shuts down. So all these oncosuppressor genes shut down at the presence of folic acid. That's one. The second problem with folic acid and B12 and methylcobalamin and methyl donors, betaine, choline, methionine, is that they also increase the division of the DNA on the mitosis. So that's why when a woman is pregnant, we give them prenatal vitamins. Why? Because prenatal vitamins have methylfolic acid and methylcobalamin, and they increase the mitosis, the cell division. Because we want less of a spina bifida neurogenic developments in the baby. So hydrocells, all these problems that they have reduces when they are taking prenatal vitamins. But then a study that they did was on identical gene rats. And they were fed with one group with methyl donors, like leafy vegetables. The other group were not fed with folic acid. And the offsprings, the babies of the group that were fed with folic acid had much more incidence of breast cancer.
See how many she gets right. Thank you, doctor. Another one. Awesome. Talk to the foundation to have a true cancer prevention program. Right now, there's a clinical trial going on that the foundation is supporting, and we're lucky enough today to have Joel Barr here, who's the CEO of, tell me if I say this right, Asclepius Clinical Research. She has 20 years of clinical research and is the overseer of the clinical trial that we're doing. She described her relationship with Dr. Nezami as Dr. Nezami being the brains and she's the brawn. So we're going to have Joel come up and just say a few words how that's going. Joel. Sorry.
Okay, with that introduction, I expected the theme from Rocky.
Good.
Hi, my name is Joelle Barra, and I am the CEO of Asclepius Clinical Research. And with all of Dr. Nezami said, I don't know how I can end with that, but to say that I'm extremely grateful to be working with him. I think everything that he's doing with this treatment and now with the clinical trial has been nothing short of amazing. When I first started working with him, he allowed me to speak to some of his patients before I agreed to work with him, and that put me over the edge. I was asking him to let me work with him. And it was just overwhelming to hear patients and their testimonials, I guess you could say, while they were receiving treatment in his office, to say that they shouldn't be alive today. And they were so grateful for the treatment that they've been receiving. And patients coming in from other states to receive his treatment and continuously coming in to receive his treatments because they know it's working and they feel good. We have patients on the clinical trial, and reluctant patient, our second patient was a little reluctant. Her husband was pushing her to be on the trial, and by I think the second week she came in smiling. She was very, very thin when she started, and I asked her how she was doing, and she's like, I gained 3 pounds, and she was just overjoyed and full of energy, and she was just so grateful that she decided to say yes to be on the trial. So when you see patients like this, and you're seeing them every day and knowing that you're a part of this, you're just so grateful that you're able to be able to offer something like this to everybody you possibly can. So I'm grateful to work with him. I'm proud to be a part of this. And I just hope that all of you are able to help as well and donate if you can and help us treat as many patients as we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Another tough act to follow. So, in closing, I just wanted to tell a little bit about my and Jenny's story and how we got involved with Dr. Nezami and why it has me desiring to help and be a patient advocate. In 2012, we had a daughter who was a volleyball player. She was on the 15 and under national team, and she had a bruise on her hip. She said, my hip really hurts. And I'm like, well, that's part of it. You just keep roughing through it, right? Well, it just kept hurting. And so eventually when we got a scan, she had a football-sized tumor in her pelvis, and it was diffused into her lungs. So we went to all the traditional places, Cedars-Sinai, USC, and the doctors just looked at me like, we really don't know what to do. Now, they didn't say it. They just were saying it with their eyes. So we did with the conventional stuff, and it wasn't helpful. So it put us on like about a 2.5-year journey to try to find someone that could help us. And by the time we got to Dr. Nezami's clinic, Emma was pretty far along. So he gave us a really good year together. I'm appreciative of that, doctor. And we lost him in 2015. But the intimacy that we developed with her and the ability to fight for her life was an honor. And the ability to fight for patients' lives is an honor. And 8 months later, my wife had a little, Jenny, who's here today, had a little bump on a lymph node. And so I said, well, we better get that checked out. So she went in and the surgeon looked at it and said, no, we'll take that out. He takes it out. And he said, what happened 8 months ago? And so 8 months ago to just about to the day was when Emma passed. So Jenny's immune system had basically kind of gone down. So I said, well, Jenny, let's go get that taken care of. And she goes, well, where should we go? And I said, well, I asked her, where should we go? And she's like, Dr. Nezami, what are we doing? Where is that? So we came in and saw him, and sure enough, did the genetics, and Jenny had what's called a double-hit lymphoma, which doesn't tend itself well to conventional treatment, to say the least. So we started working with Dr. Nezami, and Jenny's been stable for the last 6 years. So thank you, Dr. Nezami. Recently, my daughter Abby had a small lesion on her ankle. I know you guys are like, really? Another story about your family? And she went and got a scan, and it was actually 7 years to just about to the day that we lost Emma. So Jenny and I actually were having a discussion about it and said, 7 years in the scriptures is like, once you go to 8 years, that's new beginnings. We were kind of saying a prayer and saying, hey, we're going to leave the old behind, take the positive forward with us. And just as we said that prayer, 10 minutes later, it popped up on my phone, the text from Abby, hey, they think I have cancer. So we were back in the fight. So we got Abby on a plane, we flew down, we saw Dr. Nezami. We did all of the genetic work. He found the markers, treated those markers. I think there were 4. I go into the specifics, but but it was remarkable. So he treated all 4 of those markers, down-regulated all of them or got them to normal, and then said, okay, go ahead and have this little thing taken out if you want. And so we did. We went and had it taken out. And then after we had it taken out, Dr. Nezami suspected, based on the markers, what it was. And so he had to call the pathologist and explain to them some of the different variants and why it would point to that, give them the literature. And it turned out to be what Dr. Nezami thought it was. So Abby starts a new job this week. She's all excited, and she's doing great. So for me, as an advocate, I would love for people to have that kind of information before they make a decision on what they're going to do about their cancer. I would love for the foundation to have a real preventative program that gives out this kind of information that's available, but it's not given on a grand scale. So I appreciate all the time you put into developing what you've developed, and thankful and appreciate that you blessed my family and many others. Yeah. Well, thank you. So that being said, we would love to develop a relationship with you and have you consider joining us to become a patient advocate. And these are expensive treatments to put together, to formulate, to do what the clinic does. So we do want a relationship first. If you wanted to make a donation, I won't fight you on that. The ladies at the front will help you. But more so, we want to get to know you and have you involved with this. So thank you for coming, and we're really appreciative for you. Thank you, Dr. Nezami.